No, it's okay.
So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm Devin, part of the Consulting Club's executive team. And today, most of you, for your first time, will be learning about the fit interview. So kind of what we want you to walk away with from today is going into your memories and your experience and coming up with a story, well, multiple stories, and really knowing it, being able to bring it up in conversation with your peers in preparation for when you're actually going to have to recall a story in your actual interview. So get used to telling it, refine it, condense it. All those qualities are good. So outline for today, we're going to be talking about the fit interview, its importance, preparing, how to prepare for it, the types of questions that you might face when in your interview, be it on the phone as well as in person for both summer and full-time positions, kind of how to best answer them, some of the common things that consultants look for in your answer, as well as some common mistakes, and then if we have enough people willing to, we'll have like a quick partner up in practice of just an example story to tell each other. So the typical interview structure for both the summer programs and full-time is you'll have a couple minutes of just general hellos, and ice-breaking, and then you'll have the fit interview portion. For the summer, for programs like Bain and BCG and Putnam and some of the more biotech focused boutique ones, it'll mostly be a fit interview with the exception of Clearview, which they actually will go through a scientific-based case with you. And we'll talk about the case interview in our next session. And then the last portion is questions that you have for your interviewer about the company, about their experience, and about general expectations. For full-time, that intermediate point is split into the fit interview and the case interview. So when you're being interviewed, the fit is just as important as the case. That's where the consultants are really trying to figure out if you're going to mesh well within the company, with your other coworkers. Do they like you? Are they going to be able to talk to you if you're stuck in an airport? Or you're spending a lot of time with your coworkers, so they want to make sure that you guys are well matched. Okay, so purpose is they want to gauge how you mesh. So your professional presence. So you want to make sure, I have known people who have interviewed before that they got docked for being too casual. So you want to make sure that you are connecting with somebody, but you're not necessarily throwing decorum out the window. You still want to be professional. You still want to use like proper surnames if necessary, but don't necessarily talk to them like your best friend. As I said, the airport test. They also want to evaluate whether or not you understand consulting and whether or not you've done your homework on the firm. Before, like most job interviews, you want to research. You won't necessarily know who is interviewing you, but you want to know things about the company. You want to know the projects that they've been working on that maybe are of interest to you, and things that you can kind of look up on Glassdoor about the company. People will list like what they like and what they don't like on Glassdoor, previous employees. So good to do your research before. They're also going to be evaluating your soft skills and your character. We'll get more into that later, but those consist of soft skills that are consulting related and ones that are just people related. So, okay, getting sure done. So those soft skills involve examples of leadership, whether or not you can work on a team well, are you a good communicator? This is more than just technical communication. Can you have a conversation with your client in a professional way? Do you have the drive to achieve? Are you going to be working, putting in the hours that are required in a consulting, in a client case? And then obviously problem solving. That's kind of what the basis of consulting is. So the overall strategy in going into an interview is you want to know about the consulting firm, about consulting in general, the job that you're interviewing for. Most of us, if we're advanced degree candidates, are going in as a generalist consultant into the major firms. So that's going to be a total purview of whatever projects they can put you on, essentially. You don't really have a preference at that time. You don't really have a preference of, I want to work on oil and gas, or I want to work on biotech. You kind of just get put on things. And then know the interview strategy, or interview process, which we kind of went through a little bit before and are continuing to go through. And then lastly, you want to know yourself. This is a challenging process. Know that it's something you really want to do. Know your experiences fit into what they're looking for. So some commonly available sources are on the internet. There's YouTube videos from typical like consulting teachers, Victor Chang. There's also they have books by Victor Chang and case prep interview books that we actually have as the club, and you as training members are free to check out and use at your own leisure. So these are just some examples of prep interview that's available out there. So types of questions that you're going to get. They're going to be resume based, generally just looking at your resume, walk me through it, and then specifically looking at specific examples that you're listing in your work experience, telling a story about what you actually did, more than just a bullet point. They're going to ask why consulting. That is pretty much a standard question you're going to get. What interests you about consulting, and why does this firm interest you? So again, that goes into doing your research on the firm and making sure that you have interests aligned. They're going to be assessing your personality, making sure you fit. Types of questions, story. So story kind of goes into all of these things, but they're going to be asking you questions of, tell me about a time when something. So we'll get into those as well. And then curveball questions. Those are obviously questions you didn't expect. Could be something like, estimate the number of windows in a city block of Manhattan. So be prepared that there might be something that completely throws you off, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to put stress on you and see how you work under pressure. Okay, so general resume questions. Like I said, they're going to say, walk me through your resume. You want to go from most recent to least recent. Tell me about yourself, something that's not on your resume, and what experiences have made you who you are today. Those things are more off your resume. That can be more of a picture of who you are as a person and how you fit within the company. So to answer those questions, you want to highlight your education and your relevant experiences into consulting. If you've done extracurricular activities, you're a part of the consulting club, you've been practicing, you're going to the case competition, et cetera, et cetera. You want to underscore your soft skills. Does anybody know the general soft skills that I'm kind of talking about? Throw out any words? Yeah, that's also a consulting soft skill. General soft skills might be like time management, or you're a fast learner, team player, you're dedicated. So just some general things that like all employers are looking for. As I said, use reverse chronological order, so going from most recent to least recent, because your most recent is more reflective of who you are currently. and then don't rush through your experiences, but don't ramble either. Specific resume questions. They choose a specific part of your resume to talk about. Again, you want to have like a 1 or 2 minute little blurb about it. Tell me something that's not on your resume. If you're currently taking a class, like that's not listed on your resume that you think is relevant, business management or whatever, that's something that would be important for them to know that you are actively seeking experience in that field. Yeah, tell me about your role as a graduate student. How did that change your view on academia or whatever? So these are some specific resume questions. Similarly, in answering those questions, you want to structure your answers. More so here, you want to focus on your consulting soft skills, which, as you said before, leadership, but also you handled multiple projects at one time. You were really flexible in like being able to switch from one thing to another and multitask. You're a great communicator in talking with people that are your colleagues, but also like the head of the department or something like that that you have access to. You want to quantify your achievements. So in your role as organizer of the student retreat, your goal was to grow the attendance. Last year there were 20 people, this year you wanted 50 people. So you want to quantify that. I grew the attendance by 250%. Looking at those numbers is something that an interviewer is looking for. And you want to highlight any awards or honors, anything, particularly ones that are relevant. But yes, be concise. So, specific answer. My role as a TA for this course consisted of 3 aspects. There goes your structure. First, I served as the communication liaison. That's the consulting soft skill. Second, I organized weekly Q&A sessions. And third, I assisted the instructors in grading students' performance. So you're highlighting things in a very structured numerical way. That's what they're looking for. You're also quantifying what the impact that you had on this story. Okay. Also highlighting the verbs of your word, your response, and then quantifying. They're going to ask you why consulting. Does anybody have a standard answer that they want to say? Executive team. Okay. All right. So why consulting? I am really interested in problem solving. I have experience in technical as well as communicative experience that I think is relevant for the business world. I have organized many events, but in doing so had to juggle working with different people of different organizations at different levels, talking with the CEOs, talking with other employees, et cetera, et cetera. You want to display a genuine interest in what consulting is. So you definitely want to do your research on what consulting is and make sure that that is something that you like and is interesting. Talk about what experiences you have that can help you be successful as a consultant and what can make you a great addition for that company. Highlight your achievements, your soft skills, and all of this is developing a story of why you would be a great addition. Okay, those are examples of how you might start a story of what's average, good, or great. But essentially, you want to have quantifiable reasons that are conversational, but not too long. Okay. Why the firm? Like I said, you want to demonstrate a genuine interest in why this firm. why are you interested in Bain? Is it because they have a social aspect that is something that's appealing? They have great diversity. They have women at BCG, or sorry, women at Bain, LGBTQ groups. Their clientele is something that maybe your father worked at once before. You want to be specific. So demonstrating a genuine interest in the firm is networking. It's going to these informational events that we've been posting about, and I'll also have a slide at the end of more dates that are available. Meeting people, talking to people in the like in the club that might know somebody. Like I said, look at past clients that they've had. Usually the firms don't advertise the cases themselves, but they might highlight, particularly in their like pro bono work, of companies that they've worked with and what they've achieved from it. Staffing model isn't normally listed, but that can be a question that you might ask at the end of your interview, of what the general timeline is of consultancy, how to move up in the company, how the interplay is between different levels. Those are always good questions to ask. And you also, like I said, with looking at their pro bono work, that will help you develop an understanding of their culture and initiatives. Don't compare the firm with other firms. Don't say that I like the way that Bain does this more than what BCG does, because that is obviously a negative. And then, like I said, convey how you can add, what employing you will add to the firm. So personal questions that they may ask you are typical interview personal questions. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Maybe they'll ask what somebody else will say about you. What are your short-term and long-term goals? Typically, a consultant position will last 2 years, and then you're moving up or you're moving out. So they want to, most firms encourage that, and they want to know what your life plans are, that they can help you kind of, it's not like they're giving you everything, but they want to have an idea of what interests you in order to put projects on or help you in potentially moving up. Tell me about a time when you failed. This is a good story question. Again, make it something that obviously has a positive light at the end of the tunnel. Give me an example of a time when you had to resolve a crisis. Tell me about a time when you disagreed with a superior and what you had to do. These are questions that you just have to write down a story, practice it, be able to say it concisely. Getting into strengths. Pick the strengths that are relevant to consulting. So that's leadership, communication, time management. Come up with a little reason of why that's a strength. Be confident. Like I said, tell stories. Getting to weaknesses. Definitely pick an actual weakness. Don't necessarily just say, I'm a perfectionist. Like, that is a very trite example of a weakness. If I was saying what a weakness is, I might say that I take on a lot of projects, and so sometimes I can be like worn really thin, but how are you working to get over that weakness? That's an important aspect of what to say in addition to a weakness. So I take on a lot of projects, but in order to get everything done, I have started micro-scheduling, so I am working to literally schedule every minute so that I can get all of my projects in. So choose examples that you can turn into a positive light. Choosing them distant is good, but not necessarily always relevant. But yes, make it a story. Okay. Story questions. I don't know where we are. So most of these questions you want to have a little bit of a 1 or 2 sentence addition to the personality questions, why case interviews, but then they'll ask you story questions that are related to your experiences of leadership, working on a team, communication, problem solving, conflicts with superiors, and your overall drive. Some types of leadership questions that you might have. Obviously, tell me about a time when will come up a lot, but give me an example of a situation when you had to make a decision for your group that people didn't agree with, but you had to take control, and what happened. How would you assemble a team if you were the leader? Tell me about a time when, I don't think of one that I've actually done. But these are good examples. Some teamwork questions. Tell me about a time when the team faced an obstacle and you had to come together in order to move past it. What do you think is, can you think of a situation where you had a conflict with your supervisor? That kind of goes into leadership as well. And then tell me about, this is also a good question that they might ask, is tell me about a time when you had a difficult time integrating into a team and what you might do in that situation. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah.
All right, so I'll take over for the rest of the part. So in addition to Darren mentioned, we also have other questions regarding communication. You may be asked to give to describe a situation you want to communicating with different groups of people, different audiences, and this might happen in your academic settings that you are working on a cooperative project, and you might have relations. You may have for statistician, and you may have immunologist. And what did you do to describe your project to these people with different backgrounds? So use that example to answer this question. And you may also have achievement questions because for consulting companies, they are looking for the entrepreneurship-driven people. You want to give an example how you make a significant personal impact, but also give a significant impact on the group and the teamwork. And you also have problem-solving questions. So you want to describe a situation when you come across a very difficult problem and how you solve it. So you want to work through all the process when you come across this problem. Instead of giving a final solution, you want to describe what the situation you were facing and how you came up with the idea. And if the idea worked at the very beginning, if it failed, and how did you come up with the second idea. So just work through all the thoughts and give them as much detail as possible. So after we're talking about all these examples, I want to walk you through how you should answer these questions. So there is a formula we can use to answer all these questions. So before that, we might want to look at, this is a snapshot we pulled out from the McKinsey's website. So basically, the company listed all the 4 key components we are looking for. So as Devin already mentioned previously, we are looking for candidates with a strong personal impact. The candidate must be entrepreneur-driven, and they have very strong problem-solving skills, and they often show leadership capabilities. So when you are answering all the 8 interview questions, trying to address these 4 at the same time. But they are not independent. Actually, when you're giving a story, they might already address all these 4 components. And you may look at the website for more details. So here are the strategies we used when you're answering for the story questions. So when you're looking at a resume, so you want to see if they strongly demonstrate your softer skills. Because we are applying for the consulting companies, they are not looking for some hard skills. Coding, Microsoft software or something, no. don't do that. You might answer the questions by demonstrating your communication skills, leadership. So generate relevant story for each softer skills. Then formulate the story with the STAR method. And for the STAR method, we will demonstrate in a few slides. And also remember, when you are structuring your story, you may do the rehearsal, but you don't want to do the over-rehearsal. When you're doing the interview, the interviewer don't want to talk to the Roberts. So they can clearly tell you if you are like reading a paragraph that have been well prepared before. So trying to speak in a natural sounding way, all right? And also, you want to refine the stories again and again. It's like drafting your manuscript. You try to make some practice before you are doing the field interview and seek some feedbacks from your peers. So when you're doing the practice, you can often evaluate your performance using these metrics. So we already mentioned that there are 5 key components when you're doing the field interview. So you should present yourself as a strong problem solvers. You have a leadership, you have teamwork, and you have a very efficient communicators. And you are also strongly driven to achieve. So here is the STAR method we mentioned at the beginning. So as to represent the situation, so you want to give a very brief opening to describe the setting, to describe what the problem or background you are facing at that moment. And for T stands for the task or trouble. So what kind of role you're playing when you are solving the problem? What kind of responsibility you took? And why you decided to do so, right? And action, so what kind of move do you take to help you to achieve the final goal? And the result is the most important part. You want to quantify your results. So you want to tell the interview what kind of impact you made at the personal level and at the team level. How these things make a difference compared to the initial situation. And also when you are describing the situation, describing the setting or background of your task, you want to remember that you have to be specific of all the details. Who are involved in the situation, what the problem was, and where and when the things happened, and why you want to make this decision. So give the, instead of giving a very vague description, you want to give as many details as possible. So imagine we have a situation here. So the interview, I'll give her an example that for his or her department, the students don't have enough exposure outside their lab. So here is an example. What we will do to answer this kind of question. So we start with identify the task or trouble at hand. So you want to highlight the specific constraints or challenges. So what kind of deadlines or costs you are facing if you are handling the situation, and mention the potential consequences if the issues were not resolved. So in this example, so you are facing a group of students are extremely unsatisfied with the lab, the seminars. They feel that the topics might be too constrained to their own areas, and they might be seeking their outside exposure. So you may say that if we are not going to improve such a situation, the students, the innovation capability might be impaired. And it's not good for your lab publication because you always want to gain exposure from other sources, not only focusing on own areas, right? So here is our example answer we got. So other departments have a success with bringing external speakers. So that's the reason why we want to institute a similar program in our department. But after that, you want to be clear on your actions. So how did you handle this, right? You might highlight your action, rationale behind the actions. So here we mentioned that the other departments have the external speakers. So that's the rationale, but why we cannot do that? So this is the kind of rationale you're going to provide. And if you're going to invite the external speakers, And what other alternative we will provide? Maybe, for example, like a student journal club, to invite all the people with interest to discuss a paper or journal and do brainstorm. So that's kind of alternative we're going to provide. And also demonstrate and highlight consulting soft skills. So when you're doing all these things, you're gathering people all together. So this shows your leadership and also your communication skills. So this is something we mentioned earlier, that when you're telling a story, you're not only telling one point. So you're actually like present all the points, the leadership, communication, and problem solving all together. So here is the example we provided. So the person spoke to their departments and to describe their scenario they are facing. So their interview also created a committee of interested students to send out invitations to the potential speakers and also arrange the logistic program. So here the good things about this, it describes who are involved and what the situation is, when and where. So something we already mentioned earlier. So it's a very good example. And after that, this is a final chance you're trying to impress your interviewer. You want to conclude results, outcome, of your actions. So if they meet your objectives, right, something you want to highlight them again, to let the interviewer know that this was a successful experiences. Right? And you also, what kind of lesson you learn from the experiences, and quantify the impact if possible. So Dan earlier gave a very good example that, for example, if you like initiate our club or involving the leadership, what kind of you achieve the attendance by, improve the attendance by 20%, something like that. So this is to quantify the impact we mentioned. So here's the example here again. So the interview successfully secured the 3,000 funding from the department, and they also have invited 30 external speakers, and the 100 students attend the workshop each semester. So this is something we already mentioned, that quantify your results. So after that, you want to keep in mind that when you're telling a story, you don't have necessarily to be relevant to your business world. You can try to translate your experiences in a lab work into something that might be relevant to interviewers. For example, you're like holding a journal club. You're trying to organize a whole logistic. You're trying to take the ownership and organize the people. This is actually things that might be relevant to business. So if you don't have any experience with the business, you can use your own academic experience as an example and try to transfer them to a story that might be applicable to this interview. And also some common mistakes. These are very obvious but are often overlooked by the people. So you answer in something that is irrelevant to the questions. It's always tempting. You're trying to impress your interviews. But again, the time is quite limited. You only have 20 minutes, and you have to maybe ask 3 or 4 more questions about your experiences. So you want to try to coerce your enthusiasm to impress the interviewers, to make it like 30 seconds as an opening, and then lead to the key component of your story. And this is something we already mentioned, that you don't want to over-rehearse your speech, make it a natural tone. And often, the second one is very important, using we instead of I. Because for the consulting companies, they are looking for team players. You may think you are very successful at specific areas, but they are looking for something they are easy to work with. So we are trying to use we as often as possible. You may start with I initiated a club, but we successfully achieved something like that. So use we throughout of your whole story.
Yeah, that's the opposite. You definitely want to highlight that you're a team player, but you want to say that you did these things.
Yeah, something. You did say this thing, but don't try to overemphasize your own achievement. Something like that. trying to clarify. Yeah, you should clarify your own treatment. Sorry, emphasize your own treatment, but also don't avoid trying to collect all this achievement on your own.
I think just because mostly, particularly in scientific language, when we're writing manuscripts, you are using the proverbial we, because it's your lab, there's multiple authors on the paper, so when you're interviewing, you want to make sure to highlight that you had a role in this, maybe we achieved a goal together, but you led the team.
Right, and the second last one, we're trying to avoid spending too much time on the context. So, for example, if you are getting involved in a tricky situation, you might to impress the interviewers that how hard the problem you are facing. So this is something that you might avoid. That you might just give a very brief but very concise introduction of the situation you are facing, but trying to go straight forward to your story, right? And also telling stories with so many facts, but interviews does not know how to follow up. So make things simple and concise. And also, when you're doing the fit interviews, the interviewers might not often follow the whole structure. So then I already mentioned you are facing some questions that are quite unpredictable. So you may be asked about questions about how do you feel about current business events, something like that. So this is things that you're going to prepare earlier. So there's quite a lot of list of the questions that is already listed on the website, online, that you can prepare early, but they are not always on the list. So this is moments that you're trying to make being creative and innovative. But again, throughout the process, you're trying to be professional in answering always unexpected questions. And also, you want to intend to determine how you react under pressure. Sometimes your interviewer may ask you questions that you're not quite comfortable with. They question your solution. So don't be angry when you're trying to question your answers. Just keep calm, and because it's kind of pressure interview. So this is also the test to show if you are a successful consultant, because you're always dealing with dynamic situations, and not all the things might be happy, right?
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If they ask you a current business event that you're just totally unfamiliar with, how would you ask for more details or kind of approach that?
So how do you feel about current business events?
Right. If they tell you something and you're like, I haven't opened up my phone and looked at the news in the last 3 weeks, I'm totally unfamiliar with what you're talking about. Right. How would you approach that?
Right. But for me, that you're trying to avoid say something like you're not familiar with something.
Right. Of course.
So
I think you can do ask back if you have no idea what the negotiation is talking about. You can say, sorry, I'm not really familiar with the topic. Can you give me a brief background? Then maybe we can start a conversation. Like, you can definitely take your time to ask the question back.
Okay.
Yeah, ask your question back, but there are some instances, particularly with the boutique firms, the science and biotech ones, is that part of their qualification is that you know what innovation is happening in the field and that you are aware of current events that are going on. So that's going to be part of your homework before your interview, is making sure you know a couple highlights of what the field is evolving into. I was asked where I think cancer treatments is what the new hot field is going to be. So I answered that they'll be more directed towards metabolomics, but and microbiome. But essentially, being aware of what you're getting into.
Right.
Yeah, I would say this will be more common in boutique.
Yeah.
And I think think you can literally, I mean, if you are like working on biomedical science, you will have some idea of which
Right.
field is going on. You literally can just say whatever you think it should be because I mean, they don't know why it's that. As long as you have evidence to back yourself up.
Yeah, the big firms will know that their purview is much broader than your experience,
Right.
but that's also part of the reason why if you go to these informational events and you ask, how should I prepare, they're gonna tell you, read the New York Times, read the newspaper,
Okay.
make sure you're up to date on like what's happening in the world, because that's gonna make you a better consultant rather than just being a little researcher in your little bubble.
Right. Sounds good.
Yeah. Also trying to relate even if you don't know, trying to relate something that you're familiar with, trying to like diverge the topic to make something that you really know.
Got it.
Let's keep the conversation flowing with your interview. Yeah. All right, and so just for very general tips, smile and sound enthusiastic. And also, we are doing the interview over the phone. I think there is a situation not many people like that because you don't have a face-to-face conversation with your interviewers. You can tell if how they react from their facial expression. So, and also you don't know if they are satisfied with your performance. The only thing that they can tell from your personality is your voice, right? So they're trying to make your sounds enthusiastic. And also, as I mentioned earlier, that you control your speed and volume. You don't avoid to speak too fast and also avoid rambling. So this is things we want to keep in focus when you're doing the phone interviews. And also doing a lot of practice before the event. So I already mentioned here that practice talking over the phone. And also, the first one, find a quiet room with a strong phone signal is something that we always overlook. We don't know what happens, so we're trying to find a private room if you are having an interview. Right? And these are the very general instructions we are having our in-person interview. So to summary that, our workshop today is that when you're doing the fit interview, you're trying to know yourself, and trying to tell a story in a structured way. I already mentioned that, but also you have to keep in mind that you don't try to fake something that you are not. You're only to tell a story that help the interviewer to better understand yourself, but don't try to be something that you're not really good at. And any questions?
So is the summer program that will have all of them will have an interview or just somewhere? So would they schedule the remote in advance or they will just
Most likely, I think for summer it's phone. And they will schedule it.
Yeah, their recruiter will be in contact with you to schedule a date and time for a phone interview.
Right. And also, you may
And sometimes it's not phone, it's like video chat. Typically, we'll like, for example, if it's video chat, you can just at least
Yeah, shorts and shorts.
Okay, so we will practice an example story. So you want to talk to the person next to you and just do an example. Somebody ask the other person, why consulting? Just practice a couple sentences.
just grab a palm on that. Or make it like 5.
You can use the questions up there. Oh yeah, and if you are,
some of the timeline again, just
yeah, before you leave, we'll talk about these. judge.
Oh, you guys really smart.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I should judge. Okay, you
Oh,
guys
no,
practice
I
that.
should.
This is Yash.
Hello, Yash. I'm Grace.
The beer as well. Exactly. Yeah, focus down like first year. Hopefully by the end the programs and stuff, yeah. See, so pretty good. See if I can still trying to get
I don't feel like very full. I would say like.
I don't feel prepared. I'm gonna go ahead. If I don't get it, I'll try next time.
I thought they were like trying to recruit some people like they're ready to like get a job next year.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt. You guys should introduce yourself to each other first, right? Okay, you guys all do that?
But then I feel like have
But if I don't enough there, they give it.
So I'm pulling on this one. The schools that handed the Houston division Baylor, so don't for those two schools.
I'm sorry.
So those two mountains,
But you didn't want to have like a couple, like, you want to structure it. I think particularly for like two ones that I interact with, a lot of different fields,
try to contact.
Right, would you have an example kind of back then, like I constantly being on those teams, projects, because during my graduate, I was part of it.
for weddings, I think you can say that.
Okay, use that as a later some piece of it. So, for this kind of why would it be something like maybe a little bit of pitch of like, here's my thoughts.
They will ask for
essentially,
So how was like, as science, the reason I went to because science was so variable. I didn't like the aspect of everyday stuff. And consulting seems to get multiple, like that type of storytelling, it's going to give you how I can introduce a little bit of my background and how I'm already exposed.
Science, after 5 years, graduate program,
so you can plug a story.
No, that's fine.
Right. That's what find efficient keywords and stuff like that. Like give them the
give them what they're putting on their
Yeah.
website.
Good.